Okay, hello. My apologies if the audio is out of sync at all today, but I recorded this the first time without any audio, so now I'm recording the audio over it later. So for Lab 4.3, we're looking through dillards again, and you're already familiar with this. You do remember that the data is available on the University of Arkansas website, so that's where we'll be accessing it through Microsoft SQL Server. And in doing so, we'll use Tableau, and later we'll also use Power BI. Now, just pause it and answer questions 1 and 2 before we move on. In other words, answer those questions if I've told you that I'm collecting this lab. Okay, so now we're going to go Tableau first. We're going to use Tableau over at the University of Arkansas. So start up your VMware Horizon client. Log in, walton.uark.edu. So log in there. And then put in your username and password. And wait for it to connect. Right, so this takes a little while to load up, so I've paused it in 1 or 2 places here so you don't have to wait for it. So we've got the desktop here at the University of Arkansas, and we're going to start up Tableau. So I'm just waiting for me to click over onto that. So click on the Start menu. If you don't see Tableau there, it is actually down there. Alternatively, just type Tableau, which is what I did. But I saw the icon was actually there. So let Tableau start. Now we're going to connect using Microsoft SQL Server. We're going to connect to the dillards database. So as we connect, so it's going to be server sql1.walton.uark.edu. So the information is here, if you can see. Okay, unfortunately we can't cut and paste, so to type that in. I think I was playing around when I first recorded this. Here's sql1.walton.uark.edu. And the database, typo. There we are, uark.edu. And don't forget that the database, I hope I get this right the first time, should be, okay, I didn't make the connection. That was a bit silly. So I think I restart it again in a second. Yeah, and it's not UA dillards. Do not do this. This is a mistake. So you'll see in a second, I'm going to quit out of Tableau and just start this again. Okay, actually I started a second version of Tableau. I left the other one in the background. So Microsoft SQL Server, that's all filled in. And now for database, you need to put in WCOB_dillards. And then just press enter. Now what you'll see is the tables over there on the left-hand side, the dillards tables. And today we're going to be using the transact and the store ones, at least at the beginning we are. So just drag, oh sorry, no, first up we're creating this as an SQL query. Okay, so just, I can't recall if it's double click on new custom SQL. Now you've got to take the text across here. You've got to type it in because unfortunately you can't cut and paste out of a textbook. So you're basically going to be typing this text, this select state, blah, blah, blah. Now, you won't see this on the screen when I type it because I move it off to the other screen. So there, I paused it, I typed it. So what we're doing is we're selecting state and transaction amount from transact, but we're calculating the average of the transaction amount, calling that average. So we're going to have one bit of data per state, and then we're joining that with the stores. So wherever the store and the transaction is the same as the store and the store table, that will merge, and then they will be grouped by state. So they'll be lumped together. We're not going to have individual per transaction or per store records. Okay, so if you then just click on OK or press Enter, I think in the original version I was explaining this in a lot more detail. But if you're not familiar with SQL, just go back and look at the appendix to the textbook. Okay, click OK. Sometimes Tableau takes a while to load things up. So I think I paused it partway through this, and there we see the data. Now, interestingly, we've got UT for Utah. We've also got U further down. I don't really know what's going on there. There might be an issue that the data hasn't been properly cleaned. I tried to work out what was going on with this earlier, but ended up just saying, hey, we're not focusing on data cleaning now. So we're not going to do that. The one thing that you will notice is the state has come in as a text string. It's listed up there at the top as ABC. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to actually convert that into geographical items. So click on the ABC, not on the little right arrow to the right of it, because you can click on a bunch of things there. So the country is, sorry, the average, that's okay, that's a number. So if you look what the text tells you to do, it says click on the ABC. Above the state, there's both an up arrow and an ABC, sorry, down arrow and ABC. It's the ABC that we want to click on. So remember, we're running this on the University of Arkansas website. So their version of Tableau expects us to be in the US. So we're not going to have the problem we had previously where we were using our local version of Tableau and it was expecting Australian state names. Okay, so don't click on that little down arrow. That's not what you want. I think when I did this first, I made one or two mistakes because I was working out the wrong thing to click on. So don't waste your time on that little down arrow. You want to actually click on the letters ABC. And there we've got geographic role down the bottom. So click on ABC, you just normal left clicking, go down to geographic role and specify that as state or province. Okay, and now you see a little globe there indicating that it's interpreting that data as geographic data. Okay. So I've got averages per state. Apologies, I was probably talking about something important here when I did it the first time. But, yeah, I think I was talking about the U being Utah, or what is it? There is a separate UT there somewhere. So I ended up giving up on working out what the data error there was, and I didn't follow that up. So that's what I was talking about previously. Gee, when I first recorded this, that U was really stressing me out quite a lot. Anyway, apologies. This whole video is about an hour, so I'm not going to be wasting a lot of time like this later. Now that we've got the data in there for the query, we come across the sheet, and if we double click on state, you'll see that all the states that we have data for appear there as dots. They're not giving you a lot of information there. So we're double clicking on state and it populates it, puts a blue dot in every state that they have some sales from. Well, that's fantastic. So I thought I'd already done the double click. Obviously you haven't. I think I actually missed something here. I think if you double click on the state, you should be bringing it up into the columns, and then you would actually have the state numbers representing size. But anyway, what I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to move across to the map, if I remember correctly, and we're just going to make those average sales. Remember, the average was the average transaction amount. So up here, if the show me isn't open, just open that up. And you want the field map. So not the little map that's highlighted there in the left column, but the middle one there. So just double click on that. It takes a while to run these queries. I paused it in places, and there we're getting the average value. Okay, so you can see that the largest average sales are in Arkansas. Adjacent states like Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana also have high averages, but so does Idaho and Nevada. But clearly Arkansas is ahead of it, and that makes sense because Arkansas is their home state. So in terms of brand recognition, clearly customers in Arkansas know who Dillard's are and are much more happy to buy from them than people from other states who may not know this department store. Okay. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're not going to save changes. In fact, I think, did I minimize that? And I'm starting another version of Tableau. And this time, rather than using the query, we're going to connect again the same way we connected before. So this is all now pre-filled. It remembered what we put in last time. So just type that in. If it's not there, press enter, and off you go. There's no sign in or anything to do. But this time what we're going to do is something similar to the data model or unified data model that we did in Excel. So instead of creating a query that just pulls the data we want, we're going to bring the entire tables in. That'll give us a little bit more flexibility in drilling it down our data when we get to that. Okay, so we're going to drag. Now, one thing I know there's an issue with Power BI, with Tableau. What you actually see down there in this diagram, this is describing an older version of Tableau where it's got a join. You'll find that when you copy the data across, as I'll do in a moment here, the transact and the store fields, we're not actually going to have it showing a join. The Tableau interface has changed, and you can still access the join facility, but they now have a relationship facility. What it is, it's basically Tableau trying to be smart in interpreting the relationships between your data. So that relationship is actually okay. And I remember when this first happened, this wasn't consistent with what the textbooks was saying, so I was trying to work out what was going on here for a while. But as you'll see, most of the data there is okay. I can see that the city is correctly coded up. The state is ABC, so that's still going to have to be changed to geographic. But yes, I remember stressing a little bit here, wondering what's the difference between a relationship and a join. So I think eventually I paused this and I went to find that. And relationships are just Tableau trying to be smart. Okay, so I got rid of those tables, and I think I just did that again. So I drag across the transaction, and I drag across the store. Okay, and what it does, when it joins those, it actually shows you, it's trying to be smart, so it shows you which fields you think are linking together. So if the names are similar, it's actually going to do a pretty good guess. In fact, when I worked through this, I didn't have a problem at all. It was always guessing pretty well. I guess it probably does some introspection and looks at some of the values there. Notice the state this time has come in as a geographic thing, so that's pretty good. So you're going to have a little bit of inconsistency compared to what the textbook shows you there, because the textbook talks about joins, and we're just going straight into relationships here. Okay, so that is correct, geographic information. Just want to check that it's actually states and provinces, and that's right. Notice first time I did it though, it wasn't. Also checking that the zip code, that's American postcode, is also set up correctly. Now remember, this will recognize them as states because this is running on the machine in Arkansas, so it's a US installation and the US state names. So it will recognize them based on the environment you're running them in. Okay, so we've got the data there. I guess the next thing is, yes, there I am clicking on sheet. So if you click on the sheet, there's a map there. I think that's from what I did before, but this time it's basing it on the data we had. Notice on the left now we've got the full tables there. We can remove data. So what I did was I took away the data that I had there before. And now, so I think if I remember, I double click on state, follow the instructions in the lab. I think it's a double click, not a drag and drop. And notice also that they talk about dimensions of things. The layout has changed a little bit, measures and stuff that they've got in textbook, whereas here they just list you the tables. And for each table, there's little dividing lines showing you the identifiers up the top, I guess, and the stuff that can be interpreted as data a little bit lower. Okay. So then there's the transaction amount which we're interested in. Do we have the average there? Okay, so we move, if we double click on the transaction amount, I think it moves it in like that. That's moving in the sum. You can actually click on that little green pill and change it to average. So you can change how it aggregates it. But you're seeing that the little circles in each of the states reflect the total amount of transactions. This is actually quite interesting, right? Because what you've got is, you've actually got, in terms of amounts, you've got more transactions in Texas. But that's not really surprising because, I mean, Texas is a much bigger state than Arkansas. So not a big hassle there. But when you look at averages, most of the average transactions are bigger. So see, we can change the measure by clicking on that and changing it from sum to average. When we get average, it's pretty clear. Well, it's not actually that clear, is it? But the Arkansas circle does look a little bit bigger than the Texas one. Okay. Now, you know, I don't particularly like, well, by the way, when you change that, you've got to wait for it to execute the query. So I paused it a few times when I did this. Okay, so we change that to average. Next thing we want to do is we want to go across to the map, which is going to be a little bit more useful. Okay. I don't know what I was talking about when I recorded this. I seem to be ranting and pointing at things. Just change the map. Again, if you don't see the show me, just click it. Choose the field map, and this will give you a much better feeling. So again, we see same thing we saw before. The highest average transaction is in Arkansas. Now, if I'm collecting the lab this week, you need to take a screenshot of this when you get to it and label it 4-3A. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to do some analysis of the data. I'm just going to stop this narration for a second. Okay, so now we're moving into performing an analysis of the data. So this is part 3 of Lab 4.3. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in. You'll see how this is different with Power BI. We're going to zoom in on Arkansas itself. So click on Arkansas and then choose Keep Only. I think you, when you click on it, a little filter comes up. Choose Keep Only. And then for this analysis, not from the original data, but it's now thrown away for this analysis, for this picture, thrown away all the data that isn't Arkansas. Okay, so now we've got, you know, there's a lovely Mississippi River with all its beautiful curves in it, but it's not telling us a lot more. So the next thing we want to do is we want to double click city, we want to bring city information into this. Now, this is pretty useless, and in fact, when I first did this, I had a few other useless versions. Because Tableau is not good at picking up geographical information for cities. It can identify states, but it doesn't have the information for the individual cities. So all it can do is just do a dot in the middle of Arkansas. That's the best that it can do. So, you know, rather than doing this as a map, which is pretty useless, let's be honest, probably the best move now would be, as the lab walkthrough suggests, is choose the bar charts. Just choose one of the bar charts. So if you have a look up there, and sorry, there I am looking at the textbook. It's saying, hey, the next thing we need to do is probably look at horizontal bars. So that one they've got highlighted there. That's what we're looking for. So just, I can't remember if that was a click or a double click. But we do that, we've got them in bars. Now that's, you know, that's okay. Not very useful though. So I think we want to bring some city names in there. Can't remember how I did that. Okay. So you have a little bit of a look as to what choices you have there. You can filter. You can just show some cities if you want. But for this to be even more meaningful, probably we want to sort it next. So up the top there's a little sort indication. And you'll see, I think it's Mormel Online. No, I'm not sure if that's just an online only store or what, has most of the sales. But if you hover over each of the bars, it gives you some numbers. So, you know, it's a pretty good way of looking at the data. So just click on the sort. You see it's quite clear that Mormel Online has the highest average sale. So now that you've got to that, just have a little bit of think. You've got questions 4 and 5 in the lab now. Sorry, 3, 4, and 5. So we know which city has the highest transaction amount. For questions 4 and 5, how would you think managers would like to see transaction balance by date? And what are further questions that would be meaningful to drill down into with this same data set? We'll have a little bit more of a look at that later, but just pause for now and have a go at answering those questions. And in fact, if I'm collecting this lab, then you will need to answer those questions. Not that you'll need to do a lot of writing there anyway. Okay, what we're going to do next is we're going to look at the types of products that are sold in Mormel. So we're going to have to get product information in there. And so that's the SKU table, stock keeping unit table. And we're also going to need to bring in the department table. Remember, the department is a category of product, if you remember the Dillard's data from before. So hopefully pretty soon I will click on the data source there in the bottom of this Tableau sheet. In fact, I remember doing it. I must be talking about something now. Let's just wait until I click on that. So there we go. We're clicking on data source. And now we want to bring in the stock keeping unit and department tables. So I want to bring them in. Be careful when you bring them in. When you drag them across, the stock keeping unit needs to connect to a transaction. Don't drag it too far across, because if you connect it to store, I don't think they have any primary key, foreign key they can match on. So the little line is going to show you an error. So don't leave it there. Drag it across so it's connected directly to transaction. Right? And then once you've done that, it takes a little while for that to bring in. So there's SKU. For some reason, it's called SKU1. Look, it seems to have been smart. It recognized that SKU and transaction is the same as SKU in the SKU table, so we're pretty cool there. And the other thing we want to drag across now is the department table. And the department, it's basically category of product, so it needs to link to the SKU table. So drag it to make sure that the link is there and not with one of the other tables. Because if you get that, you'll have an error. So once we put all this data in, And you see that it's matched up the department quite sensibly. Once we've brought this data in, we're going to move back to the sheet that we were working on. And we're going to filter the data down even further to just keep it for Mormel. So yes, here I am clicking on sheet. So go on to the Tableau chart. We see all the data there from the various tables. Now, if you click on Mormel, which is the top one, I can't recall if it's a click or a right click, but you go to Mormel online, and then we're going to. Just notice the departments. The department information is at two levels of hierarchy. There's department century and department decade. They're not meant to be years. The decade is a group of 10. Well, it's a smaller group. The century is a larger group. So if you like, that's a hierarchy of information. If you look down here with the department thing, you'll see that the department DEC is 3 digits followed by an X. The department cent is 2 digits followed by double X. So the department century are broader categories. So you've got things like men's is the broader category, but in the depth deck, you've got things like men's clothing, tailored sportswear, tailored slacks, so breaks, depth desk deck, different shoes and stuff, and then the depth desk is the most detailed one. So you've got this different hierarchy, and you can actually get Tableau to understand how the hierarchy works. So we'll come back to the sheet in a second, and we'll use that. So see, we've got the department at the top. Then we've got department century, department decade. Department century is the broadest category. So I'm going to make a mistake now. I'm going to grab the depth decade and drag it up, but I'm actually doing the wrong one here. So don't do what I'm doing here. Now I'm going to fix that in a minute, because what I really want to do is I want to grab the depth decade description and drop it onto the depth century description. So I'm going to grab this, drag it up onto the depth century description. Hopefully that's what I'll do now. So literally just click on it here and drag it up. Okay, so click and drag. And you'll see that once I let go, it tells me the way it thinks the hierarchy is going to work. So the century is the broadest category, then the decade is the narrower category. And that's in fact correct. So we're happy with that. It's interpreted correctly. And it does that looking at how many values there are in each of those values. So what we've now got is a hierarchy that says for that century, there's the broad category, and underneath it, there's the less broad category. So over here where we had the department description, I don't actually need city there anymore because we're only looking at Mormel. I'm removing the department description. Now I'm adding in, I think I forgot to keep only for Mormel, so we're looking at all of them. So I made a stuff up in doing this. So we've got this, see, we've got the broader categories. So for Mormel, we've got the century descriptions, children's, cosmetics, decor. But up here in the top, the little pill in the rows row has got depth cent desk, and it's got a little plus to the left. Yeah, I was wondering what these negative average transaction amounts were. When I looked out, and there were a few others, maybe they were refunds. I don't know. There's a little bit of weird data there. So perhaps this data hasn't gone through all the cleaning that it should have gone through. But we're not going to worry about that today because we're just looking at visualization. So see the depth century description. It's the highest level, and below it, it's got the depth decade. So hopefully I will click on that plus, and that's going to break up those categories in a second. So here I'm pointing at it. Great. Now click on it. Okay, when you click on it, see, it's now broken it up. So for Mormel, instead of just having children's are now broken up into basics, boys, girls, infants, seasonal. Juniors are now broken up into junior collections, junior denim, junior junior addresses. And if I now click that minus, it'll collapse them again because it understands the hierarchy. By dragging one onto the other earlier, we understand how that hierarchy works. And sorry, I've still got the other cities in there. I forgot to click on the keep only for more Mel. But, you know, it's still interesting. It's just that you can't see it all on one page. But if you were going to focus in onto a single shop, sorry, onto a single city, then that would have been necessary to do. Okay, so if I'm collecting it, this is going to be a screenshot of your results. Label it 4-3B, 4-3B. Of course, it's not going to look like mine because you're only going to have more Mel. I forgot to click keep more Mel only. So this is the end of part 3. And next, we'll go on to part 4, but we're going to do it in Power BI. So take a screenshot, label it 4-3B, and that is part 3 completed. So now we're moving on to part 4, addressing and refining the results, and we're going to play with Power BI here. So have a look at question 6. If I'm collecting it, pause now and answer those questions. Okay, how else would you use that information? What other information would you want in there? Based on the average transaction amounts, what would you recommend that they do? And interesting for me here, even though I haven't gotten rid of the other stores, that's actually good. I'd like to compare how more Mel stacks up against the other stores. Are they selling a different type of product? Perhaps they're not advertising enough a given type of product. Okay, so answer question 6. All right, so I'm going to leave Tableau there. I'm going to minimize it out of the way. And now we're going to start on Power BI. So I'm trying to see if Power BI is there. It's not, so just type POWER and your options will come up. You want to click on Power BI, not Power Settings, of course. You don't want to accidentally be logged out. So there we are, Power BI. So this is a Microsoft product. It does things similar to Tableau, but it does things a little bit differently. And in particular, what it does is when you create a new visual, you will need to basically, you can't base it on the old visual because you actually trim the data. Is not a separate data source thing in Power BI. The data source is basically hiding behind each of the little visuals. So when you're creating a new visual, what you need to do is you need to copy it. You can't just create a new one based on the original data source. So if you have a look at what Lab 4.3 says in the book, it gives you the 2 key differences about how the visualizations and the data work and how the filtering works. So once you've opened Power BI, you choose SQL Server database because, of course, we're connecting again to the WCOB Dillard's database. So server, again, ESSQL1.walton.uark.edu, and the database is going to be WCOB_Dillards. Now, because the database is quite big, we don't want to import it into Power BI. Instead, all we want to do really is just establish a link. So we're not going to do import, we're going to select direct query. So it will make inquiries of the database without loading all the database in. It'll just bring the data in when we need it. Okay, so we click OK. Now I think I paused it here because it took a while to import it. Once it's come in, just use my current credentials. They're the ones I'm logged in under. This encryption error, don't worry, just click OK to it. I don't know why that came up. And again, I think I'll pause it. So again, the tables we want are department, SKU, store, and transact. So select those using the little select boxes on the left, and then just click load. And I think I paused the video again for a second after I click load because I think it takes about 20 seconds to load this up. So store and transact, there we go. Click on load. Now, it not really good at giving you feedback, is it? Oh, no, this time it does. But in some places, Power BI doesn't. So I think I paused there for a while to let all that happen. And you can tell the data's loaded up because you've got the field tables over there on the right. So you've got you've got the tables. And if you actually open those by clicking those down arrows, you'll see the fields in each of those. Okay, so we've now established a connection to the data. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on state under store. And that's created a little visual for us. It's interpreted that correctly as location. See over under visualizations, location's got a yellow line under it. So it's correctly interpreted state as a location datum. So it's just giving you a blue dot showing you where Dillard's are doing sales or where they have stores. Okay, so we want transaction amount in there. Click on transaction amount. Look at the things with large sigmas next to them are numeric amounts that can be used. Now, when you click on that, it should just take a little while for it to load up the data. The thing about Power BI, it doesn't tell you that it's doing something. So it's loaded up the data. Now, I remember when I first did this, when I forgot to record my voice, I was trying to work out, is that sum or is that average? And it's actually the sum. Remember, there were more transactions in Texas than in Arkansas. So the default always seems to be sum. But if you want to choose that to change that to average, and I think I'll show you this in a moment, you click over under visualizations there, under size, tran amount has got a down arrow, and you can change the way that it's aggregated. So I remember playing around with this a little bit to try to work out how this worked. But I think I'll just show you the result of that. So it's showing you, see when you hover over there, it's showing you that it's calculating sum. Click on that down arrow. And if you go to there, you can change sum to average. Okay, and you remember the Arkansas average was bigger than the Texas one. It's taking a while to change though. Notice it still hasn't changed. It's not telling you it's doing anything. But all of a sudden the Arkansas, see, has gotten bigger than Texas. So it's changed. Okay, so I'll change that to average. So now you've got a visualization of the averages. So if I'm collecting this lab, once you've gotten to this stage, take a screenshot and label it 4-3C. Now I played around a little bit because I wanted to see maximum transactions, where the biggest transactions were. And you can play around with this a little bit more. You can also look at standard deviation. What's the variation in transaction size from state to state? I'm not sure if I did that this time, but now at the moment I'm showing the maximum transaction. So the biggest transactions are in Arkansas. Sorry, Arkansas has a bigger maximum than Texas. And the count, how many transactions? But Texas is a bigger state, so there are more transactions in Texas. So in Texas, there are clearly more transactions, but on average, they're smaller. The average transaction is smaller. But the dollar amount is still bigger because, well, Texas is just a bigger state and it has more transactions. So that's showing you count of transactions. You saw there were a number of other choices there. And so I think I went back and I think I remember seeing standard deviation because I just wanted to see the variation there. So let's see if I do in fact click that now. No, I put it back to sum. Oh, I'm such a boring academic. Okay. So if you've taken a screenshot of that, then we're ready to get onto step 10. Now notice it's picked up location correctly. I was just pointing that out. Now if we want to drill down, we're going to lose this if we start playing with it. So to drill down, what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of this. So hopefully, I'll notice that when I'm not clicked on the actual visualization, a lot of that data goes away. Because that stuff, the choices under visualization and the data are a function of the visualization I'm on. So when I click out of the little map, a lot of that data goes away. Okay. So if you click in the background behind the map rather than on the map, that visualization information will go away because you don't have a map current. Now, you've also got filters. So let's say you wanted to look at transactions that are smaller than something or larger than something. So if you wanted to answer the question, where are the big transactions? You could say, let's just look at big transactions and then let's look at the count. But what we want to do now is we want to drill down a little bit more. So we just want to look at Arkansas. So if we do that, if we drill down to Arkansas, all the other states go away. And again, we're seeing the same thing we saw at the beginning. If we add Texas, there we are. Again, this is still showing us, I think, is that the, I can't remember, is the average or the sum? This is the sum. Okay. So we've got this ability to filter. So a sort of type of drilling down is available to us there. Personally, having used Power BI and Tableau, I just find Tableau just a little bit more intuitive, but that's okay. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to do a copy of this map, and we're going to use another map. Notice the map is Bing because it's a Microsoft product. Okay, so we've done our screenshot. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab a copy of this because we're going to, in the next one, start narrowing things down to just Arkansas like we did before. I was obviously very excited when I first recorded this, so excited that I didn't record my audio. Pointing at lots of things. I think I'm pointing out here that there's no separate data source. So the data source is linked essentially to each visualization rather than being linked to the workbook and then used in the visualization. So that's one difference that the lab described at the beginning. So now I've done a copy of the map. So I just clicked on it, press Control-C, press Control-V. I've got a copy. I'm going to reduce the original one, make it a bit smaller to get it out of the way. And now we're going to work with this second one. And the first thing we're going to do with the second one is we're going to narrow the data just down to Arkansas. So we're taking a similar approach to what we did earlier in Tableau. Okay, so now it's looking pretty. It's sitting there. And notice that we've got geographic, we've got a map. I'm going to change it to a bar chart. Okay, so then we've got a bar chart. We can stretch the little box further if you want to see. But see, averages, largest in Arkansas, then Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas, Nevada, Tennessee, New Mexico, etc. ID is Idaho, isn't it? I can never remember all the American state abbreviations. Actually, I can. All right, so go over to filters, choose state, and let's now just narrow it down to Arizona. So, and no surprise to you here, as soon as we narrow it down, we're going to have just one single bar, which is great, but it's not very informative or useful for decision making. So next thing I want you to do is come across over into the store, which is linked to Transact, and click on City. And it takes a while to speed up, but now the layout here isn't that crash hot. Each color represents a different city. The legend is there at the top. I tried playing around, moving it around, but there's not really a lot that you can do with that. So just bear with me. I'm just pressing move to here and doing weird things. I really shouldn't be doing this. I was just experimenting to see what any of those things did. That wasn't much of any help. So once I come back from this, actually this was actually quite meaningless what I just did there. Count of city. How many cities are there? 10. How many transactions? What's the average transaction? I mean, this is pointless. Right, so ignore this. I'm just playing around a little bit, just seeing what options we have there. Eventually, I should move it back to legend. Please hope I'm moving it back to legend. Okay, it's back to legend. And even though it looks a bit grotty, you do have the opportunity to sort. Now, at this stage, probably you want to take a screen cap. Notice when you hover over, it shows you which city and it shows you the average. So it shows you the value of each bar. Okay, so now that you've got to that, take a screenshot of that when you get to it and label it 4-3D. And what we're going to do next is we're going to, just like we did before, we're going to focus in on Mormel. Except in this case, we're actually going to filter it down to Mormel. So once you've taken a screen cap of this, keep that chart there. Make a copy of it because it's the copy that we're going to use to drill down. So it's not as if you create a bunch of sheets and then use them in a dashboard. You're actually creating the dashboard as you go here. Right, so that's a copy of that original chart. So first make a copy of it. I know the text said move it to the right, but I don't have enough room. So to narrow it down, visuals, just go into the filter there where it's got the cities and just put a tick mark or a check mark as the Americans call it next to Mormel. Okay, so there we've got just Mormel now. So the next thing we need to do is we need to create a product description hierarchy, similar to what we did in Tableau. So expand department, and you're going to see department decade description and department century description. So take department, I think this time I get it right, take the department decade description, that's the last one, and drag it on top of the department century description, which is the third last one. So I've just spent a little bit of time there widening the columns so I can actually read this stuff. So grab that last one at the very bottom. So click on it and drag it up to the third last one, that one there. Okay, let go. And it's just doing some work. It's working out which one's bigger, which one's smaller. So it's created the hierarchy. So it's looked at the data, work out which one varied within which other one, and it's determined that the department century is the broader category, department decade is the narrower one, just like we had before in Tableau. Okay, so place a tick or a check mark next to that hierarchy, and that will add it. Unfortunately, when you do these sort of things, it takes a while to update. And I was trying to work out what was going on here. But now it's added there. What we can now do inside Arizona is we will be able to drill down. So now when we drill down, once we just had Mormel. So now we'll drill down. What it's done is it's drilled down to the broader category. So it's drilled down to the century. Now, if we click on any of those and drill down any further, so right-click, drill down, it'll break down shoes into subcategories. Do I click on it? I don't know what I was doing there. Yes, okay, so it's broken shoes down into men's shoes, women's shoes, better shoes, I don't know what that means. Okay, now for each of these, we can actually collapse the data back again, so we can drill up. So we've drilled down 2 levels. So if you've drilled down everything, now you can't expand all of the categories, and there's many categories there because we're already at the lowest level. So drill up again, so choose men's shoes and just drill up. Now it's got shoes. Now that we've got the broad century categories, if we go to that little icon at the top, the one next to the, I'm not going to do this, am I? No, click on that icon, the one next to the filter one. So third icon from the right, not including the dots. And that will break all of them down into the subcategories. Now, this is not particularly useless or useful. They're in alphabetical order, but still it's reasonably useful. Okay, so that's taken us through a Power BI approach. So what I'd like you to do now is, you've worked through this stuff in Tableau, Power BI. Take a screen cap of this. This should be 4-3E. And then answer question 7. So question 7 is going to be, once you've used Tableau and you've used Power BI, what do you think the pros and cons of creating visualizations in each of these are? Personally, I don't know why I feel more comfortable in Tableau than in Power BI. Maybe because Power BI doesn't give me as much feedback, but it really depends on what you feel more comfortable with. But anyway, tell us what you think the pros and cons are in each of them, the good and bad things of each type of software. Okay, so that's the question we want from you, and that is for lab 4-3 done. Second time for me because I forgot to record audio the first time. I've learnt my lesson.